right, welcome everybody to another exciting episode of Keto Rocks Radio. We are your hosts, Jim Hobbs, and below me, I believe this time, is Brian Damaged Forsythe, also known as the Butcher. And we are lucky enough to have a special guest returning, all the way from Athens, Greece. But Mary Ruddick was on our show, I want to say about a month or 6 weeks ago. It's one of our most watched view shows. So we're super excited to have you back on with us. So everybody, give a big round of applause. Get your notepad and a pen ready for Mary Ruddick to share with us some really big, good nuggets.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, you guys. It was so fun last time. I'm excited for us to get to hang out again.
So why don't you tell everybody exactly a little bit about your background, in case people have missed the first episode that you were on with us, and then go ahead and we'll dive right into our topic matter for the night, which is about strengthening your immune system and how to boost your immune system in fighting COVID-19.
Yes, and viruses in general, because they often will operate in similar ways in terms of what you can do about them. So I'm a medical nutritionist. I work with about 41 different diets. I practice the ketogenic diet myself. And I got into this after healing from a really quite serious medical condition from age 18 until 30, incurable, of course, and that was fully disabling, where I was in bed for years. And when I healed through diet, I was so excited that I went back to nutritional school. And then for the last, I don't know, decade or so, I've been in practice working with usually people with really serious conditions. So I tend to work with more the MS, the cancer, these kind of things, as opposed to the weight loss. But I love working with weight loss. When I get those are really good. And then over the years, I've put together several programs and protocols and quick start guides and online education courses and all those kinds of things. So that's me. Currently, I spend most of my time researching outside of my private practice. So I travel a great deal. I travel all over the world studying traditional diets and what we can learn from them, because what people are usually very surprised to learn is that in traditional cultures that haven't adopted modern cuisines, they don't have illness. They often don't even get infections, right? So when I go to Africa, they're not getting the malaria and these kind of things, and they're also not getting the chronic disease. And they also live as long, if not longer than us. So they've really got something right. And there's quite a few things that string all those things together. And in my years of practice and also research before that, when I was ill myself, I saw that a lot of what is put out there, both in books, but also in just media in general and articles, is wildly inaccurate as to what people actually eat in these regions. So I've spent the last several years traveling to them, filming, asking questions, these kind of things, and doing as much research as I can. And I'm compiling all of that. So one day I'll have videos on YouTube where everyone else can learn what I've learned.
Now, if I remember correctly, you're also working this research for a documentary movie that's coming out.
That's right. Yeah. In fact, we just planned on our return to Africa. We're going to go back to Africa in January to finish. And I'm not sure about the release date yet, but I will let you guys know. It's going to be a really powerful documentary. So I've got that going. And then I have a lot of side projects. I create recipes for CaptainSoup.com, which if you guys haven't tried them yet, we'll ship you some soup. They're amazing. It's a ketogenic soup company, and it's all old traditional food. So broths, meats, vegetables, all raised appropriately. So organic omega-3 meats, these kind of things. And it's an easy way to get healthy when you either don't have the bandwidth or the wherewithal in the kitchen. So it's a great thing to do. And then I've got my two programs, the Back to Joy and the Keto Lectin Free, that we've been running. And those have been really ideal for this time because so many people are going through stress and depression. So that's been really fun to guide people through. And then I've been doing some podcasts. I'm going to be on Sean Baker in a week or two, I think. And I was just on Peak Human about a month ago. I was with you guys, and that's been very fun. And then my private practice. So but one thing, in all of this work, you learn so much, both from working with people, but also through the constant research, because you're always learning new things in this field, and it really builds upon your prior knowledge. And it's always interesting for people, usually when we first meet, that there's very simple solutions to very complex problems. And I would say that this virus is one of those. There's actually some pretty simple solutions that you can do to shore up your health, and also to build the health as a public, that if we did, we may not be in this mess that we're in right now of all these shutdowns and economic crisis and these kind of things.
Let me ask you a question, Mary. These other countries, you talk about that they don't eat the foods that we maybe think or they've been portrayed that they eat.
Yeah.
And they're very healthy. Do they have health care in all these other parts of the country? They spend thousands of dollars a month or hundreds of dollars a month just to have a health insurance policy that's worthless, in my opinion, here in the United States.
I would agree with you. I fully agree that health insurance is worthless in the States. It's insulting, actually. I find it insulting because it's so expensive. I was just talking to a patient earlier today, and her health insurance is $1,700 a month, and it has a $25,000 deductible.
Exactly.
Who can afford this, and what are you getting for that? You should.
Well, for the amount of food you could purchase for that amount of money, and I actually decided to get a quote just for giggles, I guess, this week. And it was just crazy amount, like the amount of money I would give this company, which I receive zero in return, and then have to meet a large deductible. I mean, I could buy multiple cows and multiple pigs to have in my freezer, organic food from God, and to be able to eat the food that can boost my immune system. But you get nothing out of that other than somehow people get a peace of mind that you have health insurance. Like that's going to protect your health. Right. That's just an illusion.
It also very often doesn't do what we want it to do. Like when you get sick, you'll find out all sorts of things aren't covered and these kind of things. So I had knee surgery. I had fallen off my bike years ago and torn 3 ligaments, and I had to get a new knee surgery last year. So I actually did it in Greece, and I've had multiple surgeries from injuries before. I used to be very active in sports, and so I would have lots of accidents. And so I've had a lot of experience with surgery in the States and that kind of thing. But here in Greece, I was able to pay out of pocket. My MRI was $200. $200. It was $5,000 in the States when I got it with my insurance. And they gave me an overnight in the hospital. They treated me like I was their daughter. I healed faster than I've ever healed from a surgery. It's really interesting because they don't use pain medicine after a surgery here. So you're just given Tylenol. That's it. But the interesting thing about that, I was a little scared with knee surgery because the knee is a sensitive spot, but I healed so much faster. And I don't know if it was I just ate meat pre and post surgery, and I did a fast and some things nutritionally, or the lack of pain medicine or the excellent surgery. But I've never had such a good experience in a healthcare system. And it was pennies compared. It was literally, I think, a tenth of what it would have costed.
Well, I just had an x-ray done probably 3 months ago because of the shoulder.
Yeah.
And one x-ray, and I get this bill for, I want to say $1,400. Like I'm scratching my head going, what did I owe $1,400 for? Right. And I called them up.
Fly to Greece or Mexico, have a wonderful vacation, and get an x-ray for like $400 less than that. So no, yeah, I think the cost is astronomical, and it's part of the reason why it's so nice to live outside of the country, I'll say, because in other countries, the healthcare, at least in my experience, has been wonderful. And usually people would be up in arms if they had to pay even $100 a month in these other countries. So hopefully things will change. I don't know about you guys, but I would be happy to pay more in taxes if we had fully covered healthcare, that there was no question of what was covered and we could get whatever we wanted and all of that. I would be happy with that. But as it stands in the States, it seems like a waste of money.
Yeah, I totally. I know, Brian, you don't have it either, do you? You don't?
Yeah, I hate to admit it, but yeah, I dropped my insurance. I have no health insurance. It's like I couldn't see paying $800 a month for like one checkup a year, and even then I have to pay a copay. So I might as well just pay for it, go get my own labs done. That's what I've been doing. So
yes. Yeah. And you can always get emergency insurance. I always hold emergency insurance. So if I'm in a car accident or something like that, it doesn't, my family isn't bailing me out. But yeah, I think for the day in, day out, but it also covers things that the three of us don't tend to use, like the medications and all these kinds of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hey, Barry, you talked about your Back to Joy program. I know you're Captain Soup, but the Back to Joy program, I actually signed up for that. So I'm just going to give you an endorsement right now. The recipes,
good.
the recipes that you have back once you become a member are just amazing.
Oh,
So
good.
yes.
I tried to make it as tasty as possible. I think we can heal and enjoy our food at the same time.
So thank you for that. And if anybody's looking at the cost, trust me, it is well worth the money, right? And I think you have a special right now, so take advantage of it. And it's well worth. I think it's $149.
I think that's right. Yeah, because it's usually $295, and we're offering a 50% discount.
So I would highly recommend you sign up for her program because it's much more than just recipes. I'll let her explain a little bit later on, but I didn't mean to interrupt. I just want to give you an endorsement. I did sign up for it.
Thank you so much. That's very kind of you. I think it's a great program because it combines the limbic system activities, which for those of you who aren't familiar with the limbic system, it's our part of the nervous system that responds to the outside world and to emotions. So let's say you had a traumatic event when you were a child. You may not even remember it. Let's say you almost drowned when you were 2, something like that. And your nervous system will remember that and keep you in a state of stress. And so then you're going to be more likely to have stressful thoughts, right? Or see the negative side of something. You'll catastrophize. You'll say, the kids are killing me, these kind of things. And the problem with that is that when you have that pattern in your brain and in your nervous system, you produce stress chemicals all the time. And those stress chemicals suppress your immune system, which you'll all learn about today with virus control and prevention. But it also continuously creates a state of inflammation in the body. And the body doesn't tend to heal in that kind of chronic inflammation. So it creates a big problem. So a big part of what I've done with my patients over the last decade is get them to work on their limbic system, to rewire that through certain activities. And these are the same things I did. And it's a nice thing because it allows you to see the beauty of life while things are still maybe quote unquote terrible, right? We shouldn't be using those words. We don't want to trigger the limbic system, but you could be in a bad situation or what you would perceive as a very bad situation. But if you are able to retrain your limbic system to respond to it favorably, you can actually not have the same stress response. And we've seen this in survivors of insurmountable things like the Holocaust victims and these kind of things, or people that have been paralyzed. If they don't respond in the normal human way of terror and fear and overwhelm, if they respond in a different way, they tend to be the ones who survive and actually thrive after the event, right? They don't tend to hold hard feelings. They actually have a great deal of love and forgiveness. And it's that ability to find gratitude in every moment, even when you're sleeping on the floor of a camp, or even when you're bedbound in a bed with some kind of incurable illness, that allows people to actually move beyond the situation and get to a good place and actually enjoy the whole ride on the way there. And that's something everyone can learn. So that's what the program is designed for. And then the diet part in the recipes is for rebuilding that nervous system in the gut lining. So shifting that bacteria, rebuilding that nervous system, and getting your own body to produce all those feel-good chemicals. Because it's really a travesty, the amount of depression and anxiety in our country and worldwide. So many people are on medications for these conditions, and they're inflammatory conditions. There's inflammation in the brain going on. And that's something you can actually do something about every time you eat and every time you think. And so that's what this program is designed to do, to start helping you retrain that.
Mary Kim, how does someone be able to hire you or to schedule an appointment for a consultation? How can they do that? And can you do it here in the United States to you in Greece?
Oh, yeah. So it's really easy. I have my schedule set to PST times at all times, no matter where I am in the world. So I make that happen and you guys don't have to shift it. And I schedule all my appointments through my personal website, which is enableyourhealing.com. And on there too, if you go there, you can check on my schedule and do all those things. There's also a shop. So if you're a quick starter, or rather if you're like your own kind of boss and you don't need much support, I have a lot of quick start guides for things like autoimmunity and cancer, and I'm constantly developing those. Like I just put together today one on lymphedema, and that'll be up shortly. And then I'm going to do an antiviral, and I'm working on a nervous system and dysautonomia one. So I'm hoping to get about 30 of them up, so that people, while they're waiting to get in, since I've got quite a bit of a wait list, they can get started on their main objective.
Well, if you can send me a link after the show so I can include it in our show notes so people can reach you, I'd love to be able to share that.
Oh, thank you so much. That would be great. So should we get to viruses?
Go right ahead, please. Okay, cool. Please.
So what we were just talking about, the stress of everyday life, is actually very poignant for our topic today on viruses. Viruses, when they come into the body, it doesn't matter if we're talking about Ebola or the common flu or H1N1 or any of these kinds of things, or coronavirus. When it comes in, it's our microbes that sense that virus first. So our little bugs that we talked about a bit in our first podcast together. Now, those little bugs, when they sense a virus, they send out inflammatory markers, and those inflammatory markers signal to the immune system to respond to the virus. Now, that's all good and well if you don't have a chronic inflammatory state in the body. But when you're in a chronically inflamed state, like diabetes or depression or cancer or heart disease or really anything that contains a chronic illness, the inflammation is so loud in your body that your immune system can't actually hear the response of the virus. And the problem with that is that the virus, as soon as it gets into the cell, it's going to start propagating. So it's going to start replicating, rather. So you're going to get about 300 ones that birth out of that one cell. And then it's going to go to another cell, and that cell is going to birth 300. And so it grows very, very rapidly if it's detected in the body. And that's where you get real damage that happens. And again, that signal gets broken. The lack of communication happens from you already being in a state of inflammation. So that's going to be things like obesity, right? As well. We don't like to say that because people get really sensitive about it. But as far as scientifically how your immune system works, when you're obese, your body cannot actually sense the viruses properly. And so it allows them to get to a point where you can no longer fight it on your own, right? Your petri dish can't handle that kind of virus load. Now, that's something a lot of people know already, but what people don't often know is the amount of risk that you get with these different conditions. So for instance, with obesity, it raises your risk of death just with COVID alone, right? If we just look at COVID, by 7 times. 7 times. You're 7 times more likely to die if you're obese when you catch COVID. Diabetes, I believe, is 10 times. And we'll go into why, because blood sugar really impacts how the immune system works. And hypertension is 4. Hypertension and heart disease is 4. Now that goes up if you're on a statin, because statins, and this is a fascinating tidbit, I think, statins, as we all know, lower cholesterol. Well, what does cholesterol do in our body? It's the food of our immune system. It builds all of our hormones, sex hormones, pleasure hormones, all these things, but also it's our natural antiviral. So what did we see in Italy when the coronavirus first hit there? It hit older men with heart disease. Now, what are older men with heart disease put on? A statin, right? So they didn't have their own defenses to fight off that virus. That's my theory. I wouldn't be surprised at all if it's correct, because if you take a statin, it really lowers your ability to fight off a virus or really any kind of infection. It could be bacterial or parasitic as well. So these things are really important to know. So here we've been all locked in since what, March or so, and we could be spending all this time getting fitter, eating better foods, exercising, all these kinds of things. And what are most people doing? They're falling into food delivery and ice cream. And, there's even
comfort foods and Netflix.
Yeah, Corona 15 that people are gaining. But what I find interesting about it, I think it's very human, but what's interesting about it is that from what I've seen, the people that were disciplined before coronavirus maintained discipline, and those who didn't have discipline before coronavirus used it as an excuse to get, fall further in their health. And that's all well and fine. I think, we can all make our own decisions, but we need to have a lot of information to be able to make decisions well. And so that's what I hope I can offer to you guys today, because there's certain foods that you can eat that fight off a virus and make a virus inhospitable in your body, and certain foods that are going to invite a virus to take over fully. What's interesting about the germ theory, if we go back to the time of Beauchamp and Pasteur, of course, brought the germ theory to us, in that a germ is what makes us sick. What I think we often forget is that it's actually still a theory. It hasn't been fully proven, which is kind of mind-blowing, right?
Yeah.
It's a little like world shattering to think that way, but it actually hasn't been scientifically proven that a bug actually gets us sick. At the same time as Pasteur was practicing in France, he had a rival named Beauchamp, and I love Beauchamp. He was a wonderful scientist, and his theory was the opposite of Pasteur's, that no, it's not actually the bug that makes you sick, it's the petri dish that it goes in. Because he would say, if I had two different petri dishes, one full of good bacteria and one full of lots of mixed kind of overgrowth and junk, pathogenic parasites and all sorts of things, and I put the same bug in both petri dishes, the petri dish full of the good bacteria and the healthy balance of bacteria, it doesn't grow. It actually dies. It doesn't take over the petri dish. But when he would put it into the petri dish that was imbalanced, it would grow like wildfire. So his theory was that, no, it's not actually the microbe, it's the petri dish it's going in. And we're certainly seeing this with viruses. I think realistically, they're both right. It's a combination. You have to have both the virus or the pathogen plus the ill petri dish, right? But you can have a good petri dish, get the virus and not get sick. So there's a real good solution there, as aside from killing the virus, that is to just get yourself into a healthy petri dish state in your body, so you're inhospitable, right? That's really important. Now, when a virus enters our body, I told you a little bit about how the cells respond and the bacteria respond and these kind of things, but viruses aren't really alive on their own. Not really. They have to use our tissue, right, to grow and basically have babies and propagate. And the part of our tissue that they tend to use, or that they do use, is an amino acid. Amino acid, just for anyone, is a protein. It's an amino acid called arginine. Now, arginine is found in very specific foods, and if you have a lot of arginine in your body and you have virus, it's like kindling on a wildfire. It's gonna go crazy, right? So a good thing that everyone can do is just start to decrease the amount of arginine in their diets. There's another amino acid that suppresses viruses. It's not an outright antiviral, but it prevents viruses from being able to grow, and that's called lysine. Now, lysine is found mainly in things like dairy and seafood and meats, whereas arginine is found in plant matter. Now, it's found in a lot of plant matter that people that are ketogenic eat as well. So that's why these are important to know. People that are ketogenic by default, because you're getting more calories from fat than anything else, you're already going to have a lower arginine diet. But you want to take it a step further, or at least I would recommend doing so during a viral pandemic. So the arginine-rich foods are going to be all the beans, the nuts, the seeds, the chocolate, the grains, and that's about it. So you can see the plant proteins, right? Lots of it in things like tofu. But if you're doing a lot of almond flour baked goods, not just like once a week, but every day and multiple times a day, you could potentially get there to where you'd have a problem. The greatest benefit, and hopefully your audience already knows this, to the ketogenic diet, is that it is an antiviral state of the body. So much so that the country of Jordan recommended to all of its people publicly, when the virus hit, for everyone to go onto a ketogenic diet to help protect the public.
Wow, that's awesome.
Isn't that amazing? How wonderful is that? I so wish we'll start seeing these things in the States. So again, you've got a couple factors, right? You've got, okay, how much arginine is in your diet? How much chocolate are you eating? Most likely for your constituents.
Every day, actually.
Yeah, so you might want to cut that down a little bit, right? Yeah. So you can still have it, but you want to decrease your load quite a bit. And then how much of the opposite protein are you eating? Now, there are a couple exceptions to the meat and the seafood, namely the like scallops and shrimp. Those are actually higher in arginine than lysine. Dairy is the best as far as all of it goes. So if you tolerate dairy, that's a really good way to go to suppress viruses. And
How about oysters? And how about oysters? Are they in the scallops category?
Look that up for sure. Luckily, the lysine arginine ratio is an interesting one. They work together. They're like two kids on a teeter-totter. And so if one is high in your body, the other one is low, and vice versa. And you can actually look up these charts for anyone that's interested in this, because there's been a lot of research with the herpes virus, the whole family of the herpes virus, with the arginine and lysine ratio. And so people have posted great charts of foods, and they'll tell you how much arginine and how much lysine is in each thing. And basically, you want to have a lot more lysine than arginine is what you want to go for. Yes.
And the reason why I asked that question, I just came back from a weekend, an oyster festival, and I had a ton of oysters. So I just
think I could Google it right now. I would think you'd be fine. Mainly one, because of your overall diet, but also oysters are very rich in zinc and most of the things that tend to help our immune system. So I would be surprised. Whereas shrimp isn't as high in zinc, and that is one that is pretty high in arginine. Now, it's not exponential. It's not like nuts and beans, which are up here in arginine. It's more like down here, but it's still an imbalance in the teeter-totter that people should know if they're very sensitive.
Sure. Awesome. Now, talking about, how about humic acid or humic acid? I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Yeah, humic acid.
Is that something else that helps prevent viruses from attaching to? Is that,
from what we know? Yes, but I think there's something better.
Okay.
So use your humic acid as well, because that's
I take that every day. That's part of my daily regimen. So I'd love to hear if there's something better for sure.
I find the best thing for viruses, and this is whether someone's dealing with a chronic virus, like in chronic fatigue syndrome with CMV or post-Ebola syndrome, or I see a lot of patients with post-corona syndrome. So a lot of people got on my books after getting corona, and that causes a dysautonomia, like illness in certain individuals. In fact, if you don't mind a tangent, we should go into that for a second.
Sure. So go ahead.
Okay, so I know there's a lot of questions about why some people get this bad case of coronavirus and other people don't even know the symptoms. And this seems, at least in the news articles that I read, which I don't check too often, but when I do check in, it seems like everyone is confounded by this and very puzzled. But I'll tell you, it's actually very normal for viruses to be like that. I think polio is a great example because we all have read about polio or know about polio or lived through polio. And polio fit the pattern of all these viral pandemics. And that is that 90% of the people that tested positive with polio during the big epidemics didn't even know they had it. They were fine, right? And then 9% specifically had a horrific case, and they were often in the hospital for about a month, but then they fully recovered. And then there's the 1% that we think of as polio, right? Those are the ones with the iron lungs and the leg braces, or the post-polio syndrome, where you're sick for the rest of your life to some degree, or you can't walk properly because of the damage, those kind of things. And that's actually how all viruses have worked in human bodies. So it's not surprising that with coronavirus, some people get it worse than others. And obviously we're seeing patterns now that we couldn't test for before, like people that get the bad cases tend to have they always have chronic inflammation, but they tend to have very low vitamin D scores and these kind of things. But okay, so now that you know that fun tidbit, jumping back to what can protect you, there are these things called glyconutrients. They're polysaccharides or long chain starches. And a lot of them aren't helpful, but there are very specific ones that help to block the attachment of the virus to the cell. And I'm saying that in layman's terms, but that's basically what it's doing. It's keeping it from attaching to the cell. Right. And my favorite one is from the shiitake mushroom. It is so effective with viruses. If I put someone who has constant, let's say, Epstein-Barr syndrome, chronic mono, or CMV, or herpes, or post-COVID, and we get them on a lot of shiitake, we do about 2 teaspoons a day of the powder, or have them eat. Usually, because mushrooms have carbs, I keep it limited. So usually about 1/4 cup, but maybe 1/2 cup per day, depending on what else they're eating, if they're doing the food version as opposed to the powder. It's wildly effective. So it's a great thing that people can take. And it's an inexpensive thing, because unlike the other Asian mushrooms, shiitake is kind of the button mushroom of Asia. So it's very common and easy to grow, and therefore not expensive like the cordyceps and the maitake and the reishi. And I'm not sure if the cordyceps, reishi, and maitake would work for this purpose, but I do know the correct glyconutrient is found in the shiitake, and it's very effective. So that's something you can take. It's worked for the other viruses. I'd be surprised if it didn't work for this one. And then, of course, you've got your zinc. Now, a lot of people are talking about zinc as if it's an antiviral, and it's not. That's not how it works. But how you can think about what zinc does, and all the good zinc that you got from your oysters, that's the perfect place, is that it kind of works like a choo-choo train going through your body. And if you have a virus, the virus will jump onto that and be removed from the body. So that's kind of the purpose of zinc. So if you have a lot of zinc in your body, you'll more easily be able to get rid of the virus.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Interesting.
So viruses are really interesting. You know, you've got to have the chronic inflammation, which we should probably go into a bit further, because a lot of people don't realize that they're inflamed at all until they do something to bring their inflammation down. I'm sure you guys experience that.
So I just have a question, because I always like to break down stuff for me to the simple.
Yeah.
So,
Sure.
So basically, viruses are they're homeless. They're homeless.
Yes,
so they're looking for a home. And so if
Yeah.
you don't give them a home, they just got to pass right through and go to the next neighborhood looking for something.
That's exactly it, because they're actually pretty lazy. So unless they have the perfect, they really are. So unless they have the perfect conditions, they're not going to take residence in your house. And so you can make a very inhospitable house for them and not worry so much.
Interesting.
Yeah, I usually give it in a parable to my patients.
I love
Most
parables.
people, I do too. I think we learn so much more from parables than chemistry. So it's easier to take the message home, and it's got the emotion behind it. Most of us have had a garden at some point in our lives, right? Like a little veggie garden that we grew up with when we were kids, or that we currently have. And anyone who's had a garden before will remember that usually one of the plants has a lot of the bugs on it, and it has the holes in the leaves and these kind of things, and the other plants won't. Well, when plants are ill, when we're ill, we actually change the signals that we send out. And so the more infections we get, let's say we have Epstein-Barr, and then CMV, and then we have parasites and these kind of things, and they're all kind of just accumulating in the body, we're actually sending out more of a signal to further microbes to say, like, hey, this is some easy pickings right here, right? You should come this way. You won't have to fight. So, and just like that, you want to kind of think of yourself, if you're currently the ill plant, so the plant with all the bugs, you want to think about all the ways that you can communicate to nature that you want to be here and that you want to be really healthy. So if you're stagnant and you're sitting on the couch most of the day, and you've got complaining thoughts, and you're complaining a lot, and you're not eating good foods, and you're not excited about anything, you don't have like a passion or a hobby, and you're not connecting with others, you're probably the sick plant in the garden, right? And so you want to do a lot to improve yourself. And that's, luckily, you can do that today. That's not, it doesn't take a college degree to do these kind of things. So you can start doing those things today to start improving your immune system, because a lot of the things that improve your immune system are actually quite emotional and internal and lifestyle, outside of the dietary stuff. So for instance,
right. That's I don't mean to interject, but it's one of the things that I think is a tragedy here in the country, where, we're on lockdown, and like a lot of the assisted living. So the people, the 70 years old and above, are in lockdowns, and they cannot have family members come into the facilities to give them that human touch, that love, that connection that we all need. And so you talk about people getting depressed, which again lowers your fence and allows such thing as any virus for that matter to jump over the fence. And then you just get more depressed because you're not feeling well and there's no hope for you. It's sad. It's really sad for me to see so many people not be able to have human touch.
No, it is for me too. I had a patient lose her mother in a retirement home, and she had been alone, locked in her room for months on end, and no family could visit. I mean, I can't imagine a more sad way to lose someone, or to be, having been in bed for so long, I can really I didn't even have it that bad. You know, so yeah, I can't even imagine. It's genuinely not good for us because any kind of stressor suppresses the immune system. So you know, we often think of stress as like working too much and that kind of thing, but there's a lot of things that we wouldn't think of as stress that are very stressful on the body, such as lack of human connection. We can actually pull animals away from each other and immediately the cortisol goes up, and the longer they're away from people, the more cortisol goes up, right? So this isn't woo-woo or theory. It's actually like, this has been looked at. We know that this happens, and when that cortisol goes up, the immune system is suppressed. So yeah, the lifestyle things are really important. And it's also important that, you know, if you are in a situation, let's say the laws in your country are forbidding certain things, then it's important that you reframe it just like the Holocaust survivors did, so that you're not stressed about the situation. So you could take it as like, let's say we were in a retirement home right now. We were all in our separate rooms and food was dropped at the door and those kind of things. We could take it as a silent retreat and make it into something positive, right? And a time to really go in and maybe write a book, these kind of things. Learn about all the 1950s French movies, because why not, right? So you can turn things into a positive, but that's not the natural state of people. And so what we want to do in these situations where we don't have all the control we normally would because of some of the laws being put down is control what we can, and with what we can't, we need to reframe our thinking very sharply to a positive or a neutral, so that we're not pumping out that cortisol. Yeah, because there's the emotional side of it that's stressful, but you also have any other kind of stress. So all stresses will suppress the immune system. Like I said, it could be a chemical stress. Let's say you have mold in the house, or you work in a plant that has toxins. It could be a pathogenic stress, which would be what coronavirus is, right? Or any other pathogen. And then it could be a lifestyle stress, like stress over finances. A lot of people have lost their jobs with this. And so, you know, how are they going to pay their mortgage and these kind of things? And then it can be a lifestyle stress in terms of maybe you're not sleeping, or because you've lost your job, you're now staying up all night and sleeping through the morning. And now you're out of the natural rhythm of life, which is a huge stress. You would be shocked for people that work shift work or don't wake up with the sun and go to bed with the sun, what happens to their hormonal profiles and the stress and the inflammation in the body. It's far worse than sitting at a desk.
It's funny you say that, because my brother-in-law works the night shift for UPS. So he works from like 10 p.m. till 8 a.m. And he got coronavirus, and he was very close to being taken out of here. He was really one of the severe cases, but he cannot get into a rhythm. He's talked to him yesterday, not able to sleep more than 2 hours. But he feels exhausted all the time, but he's not able to sleep more than 2 or 2.5 hours.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a great book on this if you want to learn more about the circadian rhythm. I don't know how long it's been out, but I just found it. But it compiled a lot of the research I had found when I was ill over a decade ago. And he has great stories in there. It's called the Circadian Code. And the scientist's name, he's a PhD who put it together. He's been studying the circadian rhythm for decades. His last name is Panda, like the panda bear. So it's very easy to remember. Okay. But it's a great book that goes into that. And yeah, the poor folks that work shift work, it really does age and wear them out and make them more susceptible. Ideally, we would all be waking up with the sun and going to bed before 9, because it's an odd phenomenon. You know, there's so much we don't know. There's so much mystery in our bodies, but it's an odd phenomenon. But the hours before midnight are the most powerful for sleep. So let's say all three of us sleep 8 hours a night. And I don't know if it goes into this in the book. I don't think it does. But if we all sleep 8 hours a night, and I sleep from 9 until 5 a.m., and Brian, you sleep from, let's say you had a show. So you're sleeping from 2 a.m. until 10 a.m. And Jim, you're like a traditional midnight to 8 a.m. I'm going to get the best sleep out of all of us, because those hours before midnight, we go into deeper levels of sleep where the body can heal itself and regenerate itself more. And Brian, you're going to be the most disadvantaged out of this group. And Jim, you're going to be in the middle. And so even though we're all getting the same amount of sleep, and we're even still consistent, right? We're going to bed at the same time and waking up at the same time, which is one of the best things you can do for your body, especially waking up at the same time. You're going to have a different outcome in terms of speed of healing, whether you're healing from an injury or an accident or an illness, but also, how deeply you can actually heal that tissue and those kind of things, and how rested you feel.
You just answered my question. I was telling you about my weekend getaway. Now, I normally in my real life at my house, I literally do go to bed when the sun goes down, no matter what time that is. I mean, it's 5:30, 6:30, 7:30, 8:30, and I'll sleep 8 hours, which means I wake up like at 3:30 in the morning, but I'm wide awake. I feel good. I start my meditation, sauna, exercise. But this weekend, because you're with a group of people and people like to, socialize and talk, and there's nothing, I'm not against that at all, but it was 10 o'clock, 12 o'clock. But I noticed, even though I slept later, like you said, like from 12 to 8, I didn't feel as good for me. I knew something was off. I could not wait to get home to get back into that rhythm.
Yes. Yeah. And unless we're living with that rhythm and getting up and seeing light in our eyes before 10 a.m., most of our hormones and our microbiome aren't going to work correctly. So, we all work so hard on our diets, and we know lots of people that do. But for those who don't, the lifestyle things are really important, because that makes up about 50% of the shift of the microbiome. So when we go to sleep, if you're healthy, our cortisol dips down, our stress hormone, and our melatonin goes up. And we think of melatonin as a sleep hormone, but it's really so much more than that. It actually is the master regulator of the nervous system in your gut lining. So what I often find is that people with chronic constipation, they actually have terrible sleep. And unless you get at the sleep and get that melatonin produced, you can't fix that constipation. So there's lots of like these down trickles that people don't know about, the interconnectedness of these different hormones and what else they do. But the melatonin should be going up really high in the night. And then in the morning, the melatonin would go down and the cortisol and the serotonin would go up. And then it should go up and pop you out of bed, and you should wake up easily and have plenty of energy throughout the day. And then in the evening, get tired again, right? So that's a healthy cycle. And if you're living in that healthy cycle and you have all those signs, you have the regular stools and you wake up rested and you have energy throughout the day and you sleep easily at night, you fall asleep quickly, you sleep. Really, you shouldn't be having dreams. You should have a blackout sleep where you put your head on the pillow and then pop awake in the morning without much memory. Then your immune system is going to work really well in that situation. But I don't meet too many people who have that experience. Most people fight to sleep, or they want to keep sleeping. They have heavy dreams. They wake up tired and they're low in serotonin. Their stools are off, all those kinds of things. So one of the first things you can do if you want to improve your immune system is get back into the rhythm of life. So wake up promptly at the same time every morning. That's far more important than going to sleep at the same time, because we can't always control when we fall asleep, right? You'll beat yourself up like, oh, why can't I sleep? So focus on when you're waking up instead, and wake up at the same time and make it a reasonable time, like 7 a.m. something like that, right? I like 5 a.m., but I know not everyone does that. So 7 a.m. is reasonable as well. And then go outside, take a cold shower and go outside, get daylight on your skin, because that charges your microbiome for the whole day. And that microbiome, although we don't use light for energy, right? We were always taught just plants do. Well, all of our bacteria use light for energy. They actually communicate through light. So unless we're getting proper daylight on our skin, we're not communicating that. And so what are we getting? But more people are sleeping in because we're working from home. And then we're all flipping on our phones first thing. And when we look at our phones or the computer in the morning, it shuts off our dopamine, our ability to make dopamine properly. So now we're going to be more prone to tempers. We're going to be short tempered. Dopamine is kind of the anti-stress. It's not like serotonin. It doesn't stop depression. What it does is more of like give you patience. So for instance, if you're someone who gets stuck in traffic and yells at someone, you don't have proper dopamine formation, right? You're just like, you're lacking that if you get irritated a lot with the kids, those kind of things. And to get that, you have to go out into the daylight. It can be cloudy and rainy, but you need to get the daylight right.
What about grounding? Do you believe being barefoot and going out and walking on earth is
I
that?
think it couldn't hurt. I have no idea if it works or not, but I'm a big fan of, especially if you're trying to heal from something insurmountable, do it all because it doesn't hurt, right? And it may really help. There's so much we don't understand. So I think it's definitely worth it. It's a big possibility. It might be effective.
Now, do you know who Wim Hof is? Wim Hof breathing and cold shower protocol. I love Wim. Yeah, so do I.
So I've been doing his breathing all this week. So, I found him, I got into cold showers long before I learned about Wim Hof. I had learned about it through Ayurveda. And so I was doing cold therapy, and then I was watching Stan Lee's wonderful documentary on superhumans, and Wim Hof comes on, and that's where I learned about him. I want to say it was like 2010, 29, I'm not sure.
Right.
But he so intrigued me because those cold showers were hard, and he was running marathons in the North Pole and all sorts of incredible things. I may have that wrong, but it was something.
No, he's amazing. And I've been following him and doing his protocol for about a year, his regimen for about over a year now. The first thing I do after I get out of the sauna is to do his breathing exercises, and then I do the cold shower.
Oh,
but
that's good.
but he, with him swimming underneath the Antarctica, the ice, I mean, he's got a ton of world records.
Yeah.
And he's, so he doesn't just talk a game. He actually backs it up by living it. Yeah. And he's got a pretty amazing story.
And he's wonderful. He's just wonderful. I send so many of my patients to do things with him. I've had a lot of people buy the program, and I've been doing the breathing and really enjoying it. I bought his program maybe in 2013 and followed along. I've been dying to go. In fact, I've been kind of jonesing to go on one of his self-guided things.
Yes.
Yeah, and had coronavirus not happened, I would have booked it, because this year I was like, this is happening. So when things open up, maybe we should all go. That'd be
awesome, because he's out of Norway.
Yeah.
So he's in Norway. I know he's got a book coming out this year as well. So shortly. But yeah. Anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt your train of thought, but
no, you didn't. Plus, he's wonderful. He's done so much for the depression crowd. Cold therapy, like for today's discussion, is amazing for your immune system. It boosts your immune system drastically. So one of the best things you can do when you're sick or preventing illness is to do cold therapy. And I don't recommend starting warm and going cold. I recommend starting cold and ending cold, because then your body, it takes that mild stress. It's kind of like an exercise stress, and gets acclimated to temperature changes. One thing we're really lacking in the States, way more so than in Europe, because they don't use as much heat and air conditioning, is that we are used to being comfortable all the time, right? So our houses are always exactly the same temperature, no matter what time of year. And although I must say I miss that a bit, because it's very comfortable, it's not natural in any way, shape, or form. And so we've lost our comfort level with flexibility of temperature, right? That you would normally have if you lived without air conditioning and in cold regions without heat and these kind of things. And what cold therapy does is it retrains you. So I often tell my patients, especially with hypothyroidism, who are just cold all the time, they don't like hearing it. But what you actually have to do is go get in that cold water. You have to do cold therapy. Otherwise, your body will never warm up. So it's wonderful because, for us, in today's discussion, it boosts your immune system. So you're gonna be able to fight viruses more easily. It rapidly brings your inflammation down, which allows the communication from your immune system to get to where it needs to go so it can kill that virus sufficiently. But for mental health, it does more for mental health than any medication, at least that's been studied that I'm aware of. It boosts all of your feel-good chemicals more than those medications. So I'm not telling anyone to stop your medication, but I am saying you should bring in cold therapy for sure. And if
well,
you
Brian, you guys were so far ahead of yourselves back in 1985 with writing a song about better go take yourself a cold shower. So
yes,
you guys were way ahead of the game. You just didn't know it.
No, you really were. And if we think about it, this kind of goes back to the grounding thing, because we're not sure about the grounding. So like I said, why not? But a lot of what we often would do in treatment centers historically, we kind of poo-pooed once we found antibiotics and these kind of things and assumed that those things didn't work. One of the things that was always done in mental institutions and often in hospitals as well for infections were ice baths. Right. And now we actually have the science behind that to really show you how incredibly effective that is. But yeah, no, I'm a big fan of Wim Hof. So, okay, so we've talked about inflammation a little bit. What we haven't talked about is epidemics. And I don't know if this is something that interests you, but I've always found the history of viruses very interesting, because we think, we growing up in America, we learned European history, right? When we grew up. So in high school and middle school, we learned European history and we learned about the Black Plague and these kind of things. And so you get the idea that people have always been getting sick and they've always gotten plagues, but that's actually not the case at all. So not only, do we know in these specific regions that didn't adopt the grain-based diets that people weren't getting these, but also whole sections of the world didn't have any history, I should say, of epidemics or pandemics, namely the Americas. Did you know that the Americas never had any kind of plague or massive infection?
No.
Yeah, it didn't happen until the Europeans came over. And part of that was because the viruses that we see that really damage us, like Ebola and like this one, coronavirus, they come from animals. They don't come from humans. It's actually a big mistake in some ways. So the virus doesn't want to kill us. That's killing its host. That's actually killing itself, right? It doesn't actually want that. It wants to be kind of a mild chronic nuisance in a body forever. That's what it wants. And so when these viruses are in other animals, that's what they are to those animals. And then if something happens and they cross over by accident and go into us, we don't have the right tools to fight it off properly, especially not today with the way that we're eating and living. And so then that's where you get the epidemic and the pandemic. But this always came from animal husbandry, from owning and raising animals like horses and cows and these kind of things. And in the States, we didn't have those. We had bulls or buffalo, rather. And
Right.
If you've been around buffalo, they're too violent. It's only recent time, like very recent times, that you could actually farm those. They were always wild. And that was the case for all the animals in the Americas. It was either that they weren't worth farming, they weren't providing anything great, or they were too difficult. And so we didn't have animal husbandry, and for that reason we hadn't seen any plagues, right? So so
that's very interesting. I have never thought about that.
I find so too. And they've posited with the Black Plague, because there's still all these mysteries as to why did it go to these regions and not these regions, and why did it skip this village and not that village. Well, they've posited that it's the rats, right? Because the rats carried the Black Plague. They still do. If you go to New Mexico or Colorado, sometimes they'll still have it. But it was always outside of the city. It was always villages outside of the city that didn't have it. And at that time, the villagers, at least in all the historical accounts I can find, and also in the site diggings that they've done, they didn't eat the grains in those sites. So it was only the people in the cities that would eat the grains, and the grains have a lot of arginine, which can feed the viruses. So the villagers were eating the animals they were raising and the vegetables from their plots, right? And this was before the discovery of the Americas. So you're not going to be seeing corn and tomato and some of these vegetables that can impair the immune system. So this is going to be like kale and beets and carrots and cabbage and these kind of onions and garlic, these kind of things. And they did a lot of ferments. Now, I read an interesting article where a historian was saying, you know, horses, and this is true, horses were immune to the Black Plague. They didn't get it. And in the villages, people always had horses, and in the cities, they didn't have horses. So maybe the close contact to horses. But I really think it was the diets more than anything else. It's okay. So anyway, that's to say, you know, that's part of why when the people from Europe came over to the Americas, so many populations were just decimated by smallpox and other infections because they had never dealt with a plague. So their bodies and their historical microbiome didn't have what it needed to sustain that. And also those regions, again, were eating a lot of corn. They were corn-based diets. They were meat and corn, but there's a lot of corn, and that's going to have a lot of arginine. So you've got that into play as well.
Very, very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
Brian,
so.
you got any questions? This is fascinating.
I'm still absorbing that. Yeah, it is fascinating. Yeah.
Oh, good. I find viruses so fascinating. I buy every book I can on them because I just find they're really, really interesting. And the cool thing about it is that you actually have so much power with these viruses. You're not a victim to what happens for the most part. There's so much you can do to protect yourself from being in ketosis, eating more lysine foods than arginine foods, doing the shiitake, and then taking care of your lifestyle, your sleep, your cold therapy, your meditation, reframing thoughts so they're not stressful, all of those kinds of things.
Yeah, I'm gonna start going to bed earlier.
Good, Brian. Good. I know that's not natural for most musicians. I know that's tough because your job
Well,
keeps you up
I'm
too.
not. I'm not playing. I'm not doing any shows. Well,
Yes,
an occasional one, but hardly doing anything. So
yes. Then that would be perfect. You can try to rewire that a bit,
yeah,
and
because
do it when you have
personally I love the sunrise. So
to. Me too. Yeah, there's nothing better than a sunrise. That's true.
yeah.
Yes. Well, do you guys have any other questions about viruses?
I'm probably gonna do the same thing I did the last time we had you on the show, to go back and rewatch our own show and take
Oh, good.
notes, because you just give so much. It's like drinking from a fire hose. You give so much to contemplate that I just want to go back. It's all great information.
Yes.
And so you explained a lot. Like, I have a good friend of mine who's 90 years old,
Mhm.
and he's constipated, but
Yeah.
he can't go to sleep. He doesn't go to bed till 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning and sleeps till 10 or 11. So you answered why that happens, and no matter what he takes. So, you know, it's these little nuggets that are huge health hacks that allow you to be able to rewire your schedule, just like eating food for health. You know, rewire what you do just to keep strengthening your health and improve your immune system. So I'm so thankful and grateful for your knowledge and for you being willing to share it.
Well, I feel like everyone should know this. You know, I so wish this was on the news because there would be less panic. People would feel more confident and safe. And when we feel safe, our immune system works better. And we could get out of this mess a little bit faster, because usually when a pandemic hits the humans, it lasts for about 2 years. That's usually the pattern where it's, you know, problematic for the bulk of the public. It's usually 2 years. And so if everyone's taking care of themselves and kind of steps up to the plate and shifts their lifestyle and their diet and all of these kind of things with this knowledge, we could get through this so much faster, and we could be out and about potentially. And I don't want to promise anything, I don't know, but I think we really could be. So yeah, I just think it's, the more you know, the more empowering it is, as opposed to, you know, fear-based and panic and that kind of thing. Oh, and, you know, some other things I should say too. And this comes both from my experience of being sick and out of, you know, when I was sick, it was very much like this because I was housebound and bedbound. So I can really relate to people stuck in this position, and I couldn't work and those kind of things. So what I would suggest to everyone to keep your head on straight and to stay happy during this time is to have a very strict routine. You want to have like a morning routine so you can accomplish something and feel proud of yourself. Maybe that's exercise, your cold shower, your meditation, these kind of things. And then you really want to eat at the same times each day. So even if you don't have somewhere to go or somewhere to be, You don't want to be snacking throughout the day, because every time you snack, even if it's a ketogenic food or carnivore food, you're spiking your insulin every time you snack. And so you're creating inflammation. It doesn't matter how good the food is. So you want to eat less often, and you also want to eat at set times, because when the body knows that you're going to eat, let's say you always have lunch at noon, your body will be in preparation for that, preparing stomach acid, creating enzymes, these kind of things. And so you have a nice, easy digestion, nothing stressful. Whereas if some days you eat at noon, some days you eat at 2, some days you eat at 1, it's a very stressful state for the body. And like we talked about before, that chronic stress causes chronic inflammation, and your immune system can't work in that state. It can't find the fires. So it's really important to do all those little lifestyle things to kind of hone that in if you can.
Wow.
Makes sense.
Makes a ton of sense.
Good.
Well, Mary, I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your evening to join us and to share the wealth of knowledge that you have in that head of yours.
Oh, my pleasure. It's always so nice hanging out with you guys.
And then please send me the link so people who are hearing this can reach out to you, whether it's the Back to Joy program or actually be able to consult with you and be a patient of yours. Because just what you've shared tonight is just, should help people to be able to be on the track to improve and boost their immune system and understand they are in control of their own health.
Completely.
Not a health insurance policy.
Yeah.
That's right. And I so wish all Americans had wonderful health insurance, but since we don't, even more the reason that we've got to just take full responsibility for our health.
Well, again, thank you so much for being on the show. We are going to be having a Keto Summit weekend.
Cool.
So before we spoke about it, we definitely would love to include you.
Oh, thank you. Of course I'll do that. That would be great.
So I'll get that information out to you once we finalize the dates. I got some, I'll share with Brian. I actually found a location. So,
that's wonderful.
Yes, and it is a wonderful place. So
Good.
look forward to being able to have you out, and so people can meet you face to face and to be able to ask you questions personally.
That would be awesome. I would love that. And I'll try to do also before this goes live, because this will go live tomorrow, right?
It'll go live next Friday.
Oh, perfect. I'll get my antiviral quick starter guide out by then.
Okay.
So you'll be able to find that on my website. So
Awesome.
If anybody wants, just a hard fast, like yes to these foods, no to these, and yes to these lifestyle things, I'll have that available.
And I'll include that in the show notes so people can find it.
Great. That sounds
great. Well, thanks so much. Have a great evening, Mary. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
All right.
Take
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.